Dear Heavenly Father, I come to you this morning thankful for this day, and thank you for your blessings, Lord. And thank you for letting us be here this morning. Pray for each one that's come, and pray for those that couldn't be here this morning, Lord, that's part of this church. And just lay your hand upon them today and give them a good day. And Lord, I pray for all the requests that's been made this morning, Lord. I pray for each one, Lord. I pray for our lost families and, Lord, the sick and the hurting. Lord, just guide and direct us, Lord. I pray for our service this morning. Pray for Lavona. She brings Sunday school. Pray that your anointing would be here this morning. Pray that for her praise and worship and her sermon this morning. Pray that you'd anoint Nathan today and just have your way here today. I pray for your presence among us today, Lord, for your glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I'm going to take up the offering for Sunday school.
Sunday school, praising the Lord. I liked that. How y'all doing this morning? Are you blessed? Every day we are blessed. We have spent quite some time in the New Testament, and we're going to go. We're going to go back now to the Old Testament, to the book of Joshua, and we're going to begin a study in the book of Joshua. So we are in the new Sunday school book. If you did not get a new Sunday school book, you'll have to let us know and we'll get you one. But we're in the new Sunday school book in the very first lesson. We're going to begin this morning in Joshua chapter 1, and we're actually going to do chapters 1 through 4. So we have a whole lot of reading to do this morning, so y'all bear with us. Moses had led the children of Israel for 40 years. There had been all kinds of signs and wonders and miracles that those children of Israel had seen. They had seen the plagues on Egypt. They had seen Pharaoh's army destroyed in the Red Sea. They'd seen that Red Sea part for them to walk through on dry land. They had seen manna rain down from heaven for them to eat. They'd seen quail come into the camp for them to eat. They had seen Moses speak and water come from the rock for them to drink of in dry times. They had seen Moses' leadership and God leading his people. They had seen Moses ascend the mountain there, the Mount Sinai, and come down with the 10 Commandments from God. And they'd seen Moses' face glow with the glory of God, insomuch that he had to put a veil over his face in order for them to even be able to stand in his presence because of his face glowing like it was with the anointing and the presence and the glory of God. So think about Joshua now. He's following Moses as the leader. What must it have been like for Joshua to step into that position? We all know change is hard. We all know people don't like change. And if you study the story of Moses, nobody knew where he was buried. God buried him. He went up on the mountain and he died and God buried him. I can imagine some of the Israelites going, was he really even dead? Well, where is he? Where was he buried then? I can imagine the questions. I imagine them looking at Joshua going, does he even know how to lead us? Moses had a hard enough time. What's he going to be like? Can you imagine Joshua thinking, what am I going to do? Why me? What is God doing to me? I've seen how these people were, and now I've got to lead them. I can imagine what it must have been like for that transfer of leadership. Moses, in his first great act once the children of Israel left Egypt. His first great act was calling on God and God parting the Red Sea. Joshua's first great act would be in calling on God and God parting the Jordan River. They began their leadership in sort of the same way. I believe God did that intentionally. I believe He did it intentionally. I believe some of these people perhaps were very young children when they walked through the Red Sea. And I believe that they probably looked at that and went, oh, wow, it's just like it was when I was a little kid. You know, He's got the same power with God. I believe it was God's way of saying, you've got a new leader, but He has power with me just like Moses had power with me. So follow after Him. Let's look at chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. Now, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Be strong and of a good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. God came and He spoke to Joshua, and He told him several things. The first thing He told him was, Moses is dead. The leadership's gone. You're it, Joshua. Tag, you're it. Anybody ever played tag? Everybody being it and didn't want to be? I'm sure Joshua was like, oh, God, why'd you have to tag me? Because he was God's choice. So Moses is dead. Second thing that God told him is, you will lead the people into the land I have given them. You're the leader now, Joshua. And I've given these people the land, and you're going to lead them in. The third thing He told him was, be strong and courageous. In fact, He told him that 3 times. I believe in God in that short amount of time. He tells him in verse 6 for the first time, be strong and of a good courage. And again in verse 7, He tells him that. And then again in verse 9, He tells him that. So over the course of 4 verses, God tells him three times the very same thing. Be strong and courageous. Have courage. I believe He told Joshua that because Joshua didn't feel very strong. And he didn't feel very courageous. And God was saying, you got to buckle up, Buttercup. It's time to lead these people. I believe God was telling him, you're going to have to find the strength in me and the courage in me to do what I've asked you to do. He spoke it to him 3 times. The fourth thing He told him was, obey my law. Do what I've directed you to do. Obey my law. Keep my law. Keep my practices that I've given the children of Israel. And then the fifth thing He said was, when you do these things, you will make your way prosperous and you will have success. So many times I think Christian people mess up. Because sometimes I think they're waiting on God to move. and God's waiting on them. I think sometimes we're praying, God, I need you to bless me. God, I need you to bless me. God, I need you to bless me. And God's saying, I've already blessed you. Get up and do what you're supposed to do. I think sometimes we are the holdup in our lives, not God. I think sometimes we look at God and we think, okay, God, are you ever going to, help me here? And God's saying, get up and help yourself. Get up and help yourself. I've given you what you need to be successful. Help yourself. I think about back when I made the decision to go to college. I didn't go straight out of high school. Could have. Probably could have had some nice scholarships, but I was 17 when I graduated and thought I knew it all and didn't need to know anymore, so I didn't go to college. And along about the age of 27, I realized that if I was ever going to have anything better than what I had, I was going to have to do something. See, I was waiting on God to bless me, and He'd already blessed me quite a bit. He'd taken me from a little one-room concrete block duplex apartment that would have made a nice doghouse to a 3-bedroom brick. He'd already done that. But I was struggling to pay the bills. I was struggling to keep that mortgage payment paid and pay the light bill and pay the water bill and pay the phone bill and buy the groceries. I was struggling. And I was looking for God to bless me. And it just dawned on me, I need to do my part. So I went back to school and graduated just shy of my 30th birthday. I was a college graduate at the age of 29. I was just shy of turning 30 when I graduated from college. I believe it was God's plan for me to go to college and to become a teacher, to teach here in Grundy County. I believe that was a part of God's plan. But I had to take the steps to do it. God was not going to fill out my college application for me. I had to do it myself. Some things we have to do ourselves. Joshua had to do some things himself under the direction of the Holy Spirit. So if you're struggling in life and you're wondering, where's my place? What am I supposed to be doing with myself? You might want to seek God, and then once you've sought God, do it. Step out and do it. And I had to be strong and courageous to go back to college. Have people tell me, you have no business going back to college. You've got a kid to take care of. Okay. But I wasn't taking very good care of him, Sister Roberta. I couldn't provide for him like I needed to. I had to do something to be a better mother, to be a better provider. Sometimes we have to respond to what God's called us to do. And then once we do that, we walk in His blessings. So when you look at verse 8, it says, this book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. So follow God's law. And then it says, for then thou shalt make thy way prosperous. Yes, yes. It's talking about, more of Leviticus and Deuteronomy is mainly where the law was. Genesis and Exodus is more of the history of Israel. Leviticus and Deuteronomy is more of the law. And Numbers is more of a who was who and who had who and how many kids did they have and how many of them were there kind of book. But yeah, it's talking about the law that God provided Moses. And when we observe God's commandments, when we observe God's law, we make our way prosperous. Because when we line up with God, we're going to make wise decisions. We're going to make godly decisions. And God will bless us through our own actions of doing what he's commanded us to do. And that's what he was telling Joshua here. Keep my law. Keep the things that I've told you to do. And you'll prosper because you are choosing me. That's when we prosper. It's when we choose God. Verses 10 through 18. Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, Pass through the host and command the people, saying, Prepare you victuals, for within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan, to go in to possess the land, which the Lord your God giveth you to possess it. And to the Reubenites, and to the Gadites, and to half the tribe of Manasseh, spake Joshua, saying, Remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, The Lord your God hath given you rest, and hath given you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your cattle shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side Jordan, but ye shall pass before your brethren armed, all the mighty men of valor, and help them, until the Lord have given your brethren rest, as he hath given you. And they also have possessed the land which the Lord your God giveth them. Then ye shall return into the land of your possession, and enjoy it, which Moses the Lord's servant gave you on this side Jordan, toward the sunrising. And they answered Joshua, saying, All that thou commandest us we will do, and whithersoever thou sendest us we will go. According as we hearken unto Moses in all things, so will we hearken unto thee. Only the Lord thy God be with thee, as he was with Moses. Whosoever he be that doth rebel against thy commandment, and will not hearken to thy words, in all that thou commandest him, he shall be put to death. Only be strong and of a good courage. So Joshua talked to the leaders of the people, and he said, Get ready, because within 3 days, we're crossing the Jordan River. We're going in. We're going to start possessing the land. But there were the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh, that they had talked to Moses prior to this, and they had told Moses that they preferred to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan River. They dealt with cattle. Their trade was in cattle. And they liked the land that was on the eastern side of the Jordan River. It was good land for raising cows and sheep and goats and good for just shepherd people. Just good for that kind of farming type occupation. And so they had made a deal with Moses that they would stay on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And God had approved that through Moses. They'd learned that God approved it, but they had to go help fight with their fellow Israelites for the land that was on the western side of the Jordan River. So they had set up housekeeping, so to speak, on that eastern side, and they were leaving their wives and their children to go over the Jordan River and fight there at the Battle of Jericho and future battles until they had possessed the land. And so Joshua here is telling them to get ready to go. The people here echoed God's words to Joshua to be strong and courageous. Look at the way it ended in verse 18. Only be strong and of a good courage. God's people spoke to Joshua to be strong and courageous. Very often, God will speak to our pastors. Our pastor here hears from God. I firmly believe that. And I'm sure that he hears God at times. Tell him to be strong and be courageous. But you know what? He needs to hear it from us sometimes too. He needs to hear it from us too. We need to reinforce what God is speaking to our leaders. We need to encourage the leadership of the church. And so Pastor Nathan and Sister Faith need us sometimes to look at them and say, be strong, be courageous, follow God's will. You've heard from God, act on it. We're with you. That's what they were saying. We're with you, Joshua. We're going to do what you're asking us to do, and you have courage, and you be strong, and lead us on. They supported Joshua as the new leader, even to the point of promising death to those who rebelled against Joshua. Most of these had grown up in the wilderness, looking forward to the promise of leaving the wilderness for the promised land. The generation before them had been the slaves. They had been the adults that were enslaved in Egypt. And they were constantly looking backwards to Egypt. I remember in Egypt when we had garlic and leeks, garlic and onions. I mean, I like garlic and onions somewhat, but if I'm going to remember something about something I've eaten, it's probably not going to be, oh, I remember the garlic and the onions. That's just to add a little bit of flavor to your food. That's not something to remember fondly. But that's what they would do. I remember the garlic and onions of Egypt. I remember how we had plenty back there. They were being fed by the hand of God. Fed manna and quail. Who would want to talk about garlic and onions when you've got nice bread and meat? They were looking back to the past. But this generation hadn't known what it was to be slaves. Some of them had been born in the wilderness. They hadn't even known what it was to live in Egypt, even as a child. They were looking forward to the promises of God. We need to be looking forward to the promises of God. When we were in sin, that was a type of Egypt. There's an old song in the Redback hymnal. Egypt was once my home, I was a slave. Sin was once my home, that's once where I dwelt. There is nothing in my sinful past that I can look back to with good memories. There's nothing back there associated with my sin that I can. Now, I was living in sin at times in my life when some good things happened. But most of my life that I was not serving God is not even worth remembering. I want to look forward to the promises of God. I want to look at the present circumstances now and how blessed I am, because there's nothing to go back to. And that's what happened with that first generation, is they want to go back to Egypt. They remembered Egypt like it was a wonderful place to live, and they want to go back to it. We've got to put that past behind us and move forward, and they were ready to do this with Joshua. Let's take a look at chapter 2, verses 1 through 14. And Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, Go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came into an harlot's house named Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. And it came to pass about the time of the shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords, and as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gate. And before they were laid down, she came up unto them upon the roof. And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you, when you came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above, and in earth beneath. Now therefore I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have shewed you kindness, that ye will also shew kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token. and that ye will save alive my father and my mother and my brethren and my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And the men answered her, Our life for yours, if ye utter not this our business. And it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee. The first thing that strikes me here is that in verse 1 of chapter 2, Joshua sends out 2 spies to go spy out Jericho. Joshua had been part of a spy party once upon a time, 40 years earlier, when Moses sent out 12 spies to spy out the land. And 10 of them came back with a bad report, and Joshua and Caleb came back with a good report of, yeah, there are giants there, but we can do this. We've got God with us. I wonder if that experience of spying out the land with a total of 12 people influenced Joshua's decision to send only 2. Have you ever tried to get 12 people together to make a decision? You ever had a big group together and you said, well, we need to go eat somewhere. Where y'all want to go eat? Whoo, that gets fun. That gets fun. As you got somebody that likes steak, and you've got somebody that likes fast food, and somebody likes seafood, and somebody is vegetarian, and somebody's this, and somebody's that, and everybody's got their own opinion of, oh, I love Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel, their food's awful. Oh, I love McDonald's. What? Their burgers are too greasy. Their fries are not even potatoes. You get all this. I can't look at Bree. She's laughing. She'll get me tickled. You've got all these different opinions. Can you imagine what it must have been like for Joshua and Caleb when they went with those 10 other people that all they could see was the giants and they couldn't see God? I wonder if that was part of why Joshua just sent 2 people. I wonder if he said, I'm not going to make the same decision that Moses did of sending 12. I was a part of that. I know how that turned out. I'm just going to send 2. And surely 2 people can come up with the decision for us to go in, because I know God said for us to do it. I don't want to send a bunch of people to come back and go, oh, that city's got walls around it. There's no way we never get in there. He left the doubters in the camp and sent a couple of people to spy it out. And those people made a highly unlikely choice of people to visit to get the dirt on the city. They went to a harlot's house. Rahab was a harlot. The Bible says that. And that's where they went. No doubt she probably had a lot of men to visit. And no doubt those men gave her lots of information. So it was a pretty smart choice in a lot of ways. Sometimes we discount people that can be helpful in the move of God. We've got to be careful. Because they went there to Rahab, and Rahab had heard of God, and she was ready to accept God. She was ready to become a part of the Israelite nation. She was ready to trust in God for her salvation. She joined with the Israelites. At this point, she made a decision. I no longer want to be a part of Jericho. I want to be with these people who know the God of heaven and earth. I want what they have. Sometimes we've got to go to some unpleasant places to reach some unpleasant people with an unpleasant history, because they're ready to make a difference in their lives. They're ready to trust God. And they went there, and these 2 spies, because they went there, not only was their life saved by a woman who was willing to hide them and lie about about their whereabouts. But her life and her family's life was saved. And if you don't know it already, some of you probably know it already, but Rahab wound up in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. She wound up being one of Jesus' ancestors. Jesus descended from her. God can use anybody who's willing to turn to him. Rahab was willing to turn to him. Now, he wouldn't have used her if she hadn't had a willing and obedient heart. She had a willing and obedient heart. She recognized God for who he was, and she was ready to turn her life around. Let's look at 15 through 24. Then she let them down by a cord through the window, for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. And she said unto them, Get you to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourselves there 3 days, until the pursuers be returned, and afterward may you go your way. And the men said unto her, We will be blameless of this thine oath, which thou hast made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window, which thou didst let us down by. And thou shalt bring thy father, and thy mother, and thy brethren, and all thy father's household home unto thee. And it shall be that whosoever shall go out of the doors of thy house into the street, his blood shall be upon his head. And we will be guiltless, and whosoever shall be within the house, his blood shall be on our head, if any hand be upon him. And if thou utter this our business, then we will be quit of thine oath which thou hast made us to swear. And she said, According unto your word, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed. And she bound the scarlet line in the window. And they went and came into the mountain, and abode there 3 days, until the pursuers were returned. And the pursuers sought them throughout all the way, but found them not. So the 2 men returned, and descended from the mountain, and passed over, and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and told him all things that befell them. And they said unto Joshua, Truly the Lord hath delivered into our hands all the land, for even all the inhabitants of the country do faint because of us. They came back with a good report. We're ready to go fight. They're afraid of us because of God. And Rahab had that scarlet thread, that scarlet material that she hung in the window as a sign to the Israelites of, this is the house you spare. Anybody that was in Rahab's house, once the battle of Jericho was fought, and that's coming up, once that battle was fought, anybody that was in that house was safe because of her actions, because of her trust in the Lord. She left that scarlet cord there as a marker of where she and her family would be, so the Israelites would spare her life and their lives. Let's look at chapter 3, verses 7 through 17. And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day will I begin to magnify thee in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. And thou shalt command the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, When ye are come to the brink of the water of Jordan, ye shall stand still in Jordan. And Joshua said unto the children of Israel, Come hither, and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, Hereby ye shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Hivites, and the Perizzites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth passeth over before you into Jordan. Now therefore take you 12 men out of the tribes of Israel, out of every tribe of man. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests that bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of Jordan, that the waters of Jordan shall be cut off from the waters that come down from above, and they shall stand upon an heap. And it came to pass, when the people removed from their tents, to pass over Jordan, and the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as they that bear the ark were come into Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for the Jordan overfloweth all his banks all the time of harvest, that the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon an heap, very far from the city Adam, that is beside Saraton. And those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed, and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. And the priests that bare the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed clean over Jordan. In verse 7, God told Joshua that he would magnify him in the eyes of the people so they would know that God was with Joshua like he had been with Moses. God told Joshua, I'm going to let the people see what a leader you are, what a leader I have chosen. In verses 9 and 10, Joshua says, hear the words of God. But notice that he didn't mention himself. In that whole passage there, beginning in verse 9, when he talks about what's going to happen with them crossing the Jordan River, he never draws attention to himself. If God has chosen you as a leader, you don't have to promote yourself. God will promote you. Joshua had humility. Good leaders are humble. They're humble. They don't feel the need to brag on themselves. They know God's with them. And they know that whatever needs to be done, God will make it happen. So they don't brag on themselves. He just told them, you're going over. And those priests stepped into that water during flood stage. It says there that the Jordan River was out of its banks during the entire time of harvest. It was a rainy season. And all that water coming from upstream would flood that river for the entire harvest season. And yet, all that water upstream was stopped when those priests stepped their feet into that river. Can you imagine watching that happen? You know, we live here on the mountain where we don't have to worry a whole lot about flooding. But if you've ever been down to Pelham or Tarleton Valley, when it's come a lot of rain, and all this rain that we get here on the mountain runs off into the Collins River, or that river in Pelham, I can't think of the name of it. Or if you live far enough up on the mountain toward Marion County, it runs off into the Sequatchie River, those rivers. You can see that water rising, because that water's running downhill. It's running off this mountain. Can you imagine being down there in Pelham where that area's flooded and just stepping into that water, and all of a sudden it's dry land and the water's not coming off the mountain into it? That's what they witnessed. They just witnessed those priests step into that water, and it was just like it dried up. And there was no water flowing anywhere. It was gone. It stopped. I can't imagine even witnessing that. That had to be an amazing thing to see, because we all know the power of water. We've seen what it can do. It took faith on those priests' part. Think about that. But they were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They were carrying the presence of God with them. When you carry the presence of God with you, if God tells you to do something, you can defy the very laws of nature. If God tells you to do it, better be sure it's God. Better be sure it's God. But if you've got the presence of God with you and God speaks to you to do something, it doesn't matter what the laws of nature was. God created nature. He can use it however he chooses to use it. And he chose with this to use the parting of the Jordan River for his glory. And to show not only the Israelites, but I'm sure there were people in Canaan there watching. And they were going, here they come. How are they going to get across the river? And they probably saw that river dry up like that. I imagine they just couldn't even believe what they were seeing, to see that happen. Let's look at chapter 4, and we're going to read the entire chapter here. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 24. And it came to pass, when all the people were clean passed over Jordan, that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Take you 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe of man, and command you them, saying, Take you hence out of the midst of Jordan, and of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones, and ye shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where ye shall lodge this night. Then Joshua called the 12 men, whom he had prepared of the children of Israel out of every tribe of man. And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of Jordan, and take ye up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye by these stones? Then ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over Jordan. The waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. And the children of Israel did so as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of Jordan, as the Lord spake unto Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them unto the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priest, which bare the ark of the covenant, stood, and they are there unto this day. For the priest, which bare the ark, stood in the midst of Jordan, until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to speak unto the people, according to all that Moses commanded Joshua. And the people hasted and passed over. And it came to pass, when all the people were clean passed over, that the ark of the Lord passed over, and the priest in the presence of the people. And the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh passed over, armed before the children of Israel, as Moses spake unto them. About 40,000 prepared for war passed over before the Lord unto battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day the Lord magnified Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him as they feared Moses all the days of his life. And the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Command the priests that bear the ark of the testimony, that they come up out of Jordan. Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, Come ye up out of Jordan. And it came to pass, when the priests that bare the ark of the covenant of the Lord were come up out of the midst of Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up onto the dry land, that the waters of Jordan returned into their place, and flowed over all his banks, as they did before. And the people came up out of Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and encamped in Gilgal, in the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones, which they took out of Jordan, did Joshua pitch in Gilgal. And he spake unto the children of Israel, saying, When your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean these stones? Then ye shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you, until you were passed over, as the Lord your God did of the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us, until we were gone over, that all the people of the earth might know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that ye might fear the Lord your God forever. They recognized that God was with Joshua, just like he had been with Moses. And isn't it amazing that those priests stood there in the middle of that river with it dried up on dry land, and they waited. And when all the children of Israel passed over the Jordan River, then those priests stepped up out of that riverbed, and when they stepped up out of that riverbed onto the bank, the water came back. God's timing. He brought it right back to where it was, so that people could see that it was the presence of God that performed that miracle. I want to know this morning, are you building a memorial for future generations? Has God moved in your life? And if so, are you passing the testimony of that movement in your life to your children, to your grandchildren, to your nieces, your nephews, to those around you who are younger, who may not have seen God work in their lives like he's worked in yours? I thank God that I had people in my life that passed on what God had done for them, so that I knew what God could do. We are responsible for the coming generations. We're responsible for them. If we don't let these children of this church know that there is a God in heaven who's concerned about the earth and concerned about them, we have failed our new generation. We've failed them. I have people who sowed into my life. I remember the prayers of my Granny Reeves, my daddy's mama. She had a son that was in a bad car wreck in Manchester. We got a phone call. He's paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors are saying he'll never walk again. I flighted him to, I think it was Vanderbilt, somewhere in Nashville. And they were trying to decide whether or not to go tell my grandmother what had happened. And I said, she needs to know. That's her son. She needs to know. She was older. They were concerned about the stress of knowing her son had been in a wreck. And I told them, I said, she needs to know. And they said, well, who's going to tell her? I said, I'll go tell her. Because she needs to know. She's a praying woman. She needs to know what's going on with her kid. I was at my mama's house, and I walked just through the yard to my grandmother's. And the minute I walked through the door, she looked at me and she said, what's wrong? She knew. She knew something was wrong. And I started telling her that her son had been in a wreck. And I told her, I said, he's hurt pretty bad, and they're saying that he's going to be paralyzed from the waist down. He'll never walk again. She said, I'm not believing that. And she started praying right then and there. And it wasn't about 15 minutes later, the phone rang. He was moving his legs. Doctors came back and said, oh, we were wrong. He's got movement. I remember that. She left behind a legacy, a testimony that prayer changes things. She left behind that in my life. That prayer changes things. My grandmother Blevins, my mama's mama, was a part of the Baptist denomination for just about all of her life. Sweet little lady until you made her mad. Then she threatened to whip you with her umbrella. She was feisty. And I remember very well her being probably in her 60s or 70s. She was getting a little older, and she said, I love my Baptist church, but I think there's more. She's served God all of her life. And she's got to a place where she says, I think there's more. And she changed churches. She'd attended that church since my mama was a little bitty girl. But she decided there was more. And she left that church to go to a Pentecostal church. And we'd walk to church. She never drove in her life. Her transportation were her feet and the city bus. That was it. Or if somebody came and picked her up and took her somewhere every now and then, that might happen. But we would walk to that church, and she died praying for the baptism of the Holy Spirit. She had dipped Bruton snuff all of her life. She started dipping when she was a little girl and dipped all of her life. You go in, she'd want to hug and kiss you, and she had Bruton snuff running down the corners of her mouth. Yeah, be careful what kind of cup you picked up around her to drink from. You might be drinking her Bruton snuff. But she loved God. And she told me one day, she said, I quit dipping. I said, Mama, you quit dipping? She said, I sure did. She said, if that's what's standing between me and the Holy Ghost, I'm giving it up. I'm not taking another dip. I told God I'd give it up. And I gave it up. She dipped for 60-something years probably. But she wanted more of God. She left behind a testimony that there's more to God than what you have. Seek for it and be willing to give up anything you feel like is standing between you and what God has for you. Are we leaving behind a memorial of God's power in our lives? I challenge you this week. Find somebody younger and testify to them of something God has done for you.